Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. A very good day to you and a warm welcome to another edition. This is Life Matters, where every life does matter. And we'd love for you to interact with us as well, whether you're across the land and over the beautiful seas. We would like you to join us live right now on the World Wide Web. Hilaal.tv, and you can join with your family as you watch it on our DSTV platform. And remember, we can also upload the show, at least we do upload the show after our broadcasts, and you can watch it later on our YouTube channel, Hilaal Life Matters on YouTube. I'm Khawa Solomon. Stay with me as we connect with you with a very important topic, but don't forget to also connect with us via our social media platforms, our email, and our WhatsApp line as well. We love how you interact with us. A very important topic where an impact on the world today is, of course, a discussion everywhere, and that is the situation in Gaza. We delve into important topics that impact our world today, and specifically today we will have a special focus on mental health in Gaza, a region that has faced numerous challenges over the years. To shed light on this crucial subject, we are joined by an expert in educational psychology with a deep understanding of mental health and the dynamics in a challenging environment. We welcome to the show none other than Dr. Yusuf, Lalken, our educational psychologist all the way from the Western Cape. Assalamu alaikum to you, Doc, and welcome to Life Matters.
Wa alaikum salam, Khawa, and shukran for the invitation to join you today.
A very important topic. Often some of us are too scared to talk about, how we're feeling with regards to the situation in Gaza, but we also understand that there is mental conditions that is at high alert with regards to those that are affected in that region of Gaza. So understanding this context, can you provide our viewers with an overview of the current mental health situation in Gaza, considering the unique challenges faced by these residents, children, mothers and fathers?
Yeah. Well, Khawa, it is indeed a very difficult topic to discuss. I think personally and emotionally, we're all impacted by what's happening in Gaza at the moment. And we all struggle to make sense of it, just logically and emotionally. And of course, the discussion today is to some extent a bit premature, because we know that at the moment, the massacre, the genocide in Gaza has been put on pause. Which suggests that it may resume in the next couple of days. Yeah. And so the horror that has visited Gaza is not over. And the full story, I think we will only know in the next few weeks and months and probably years as to the full impact on the citizens and civilians of Gaza. But I think we do have the benefit of hindsight. We have a history of Gaza. I think maybe to begin to talk about mental health as not just simply an event, it is an accumulation of events. And so with Gaza, this is indeed the case. And I'd like to just make 3 points or 4 points to start the discussion with regard to context. And that is for our viewers to fully appreciate the environment that the children and the mothers and fathers of Gaza live in. Gaza is a very small area. It is approximately 41 kilometers in length and 11 kilometers in width. And so I invite viewers to imagine that space if they drive one day to get a sense of the area. And in terms of square meters, it is approximately 365 square kilometers. Now, what does that mean? If we take the city of Cape Town, for example, the area that it covers is approximately 2,455 square kilometers. In other words, if we take the city of Cape Town and we divide it into 6 portions, then Gaza constitutes 1/6 the size of Cape Town. And then I want us to imagine that within that small area of 365 square kilometers, you have approximately 2.2 million people, of which approximately 1 million are children. To really get a sense of that, I want to just then add that in Israel, the population per square kilometer is approximately 100. In Gaza, the population per square meter is 6,500. So to start off, when we talk about mental health, we talk about the actual living and material conditions in which people find themselves. And so you can imagine that in a densely populated area, 6,500 people per square meter, you have limited resources, you have families living together in large numbers, there is limitation in terms of movement and in terms of privacy. So immediately, I think one has a sense that the potential for mental health conditions would be very high given that environment. The second point I want to make is that we often speak about Gaza as an open air prison. And I think a commentator recently challenged that description because I think it is indeed an inappropriate description of the area itself. Because prison suggests criminality. Prison suggests that there was due process of law and there's a sentence passed on people. And it suggests that even prisoners have access to lawyers and access to the law in their defense. And we know that Gaza is anything but a prison. It is, and we should begin to call it the world's largest concentration camp. That's what it is. It's surrounded by walls. It has one exit and entrance on either end, and it is tightly controlled. There is no protection for the citizens of Gaza from any law, not international law, not any law. There's no freedom of movement. They have limited access to water. They have limited access to electricity. And what many people fail to understand that even their nutrition is closely monitored. So Gaza is controlled in every single respect. They are controlled as to what they eat in order to control the calories that they consume. Now, the last time this kind of conditions were imposed on the people was during Nazi Germany. And ironically enough, the people that were subjected to such conditions were the Jews themselves. So those are the sort of conditions that they lived in. And the third element that I want to maybe raise, we can always pick this up at the next conversation, of course, is to refer to what is happening in Gaza as a war, because it's not a war. There are no arms involved here. There are no planes, airplanes. There's no jet planes. There's no tanks. There's no gunboats. There's nothing that the 2.2 million people have in defense of themselves. So this is not a war, and we should refrain from referring to it as a war. It is, in fact, a genocide. And ironically, again, for this concept of genocide was coined by a Polish Jewish lawyer to describe what was happening to the Jews. And he made 2 points about the concept of a genocide. The one we know, and that is the deliberate killing of large numbers of people indiscriminately. And the killing is based entirely on their ethnicity, it is based on their race, it's based on their religion. And the intention, clearly with the genocide as it is, and it has been made clear by the Israelis in their attack on Gaza, is to destroy Gaza and its people. So that's the one element of a genocide that we now see playing itself out. But there's another definition of a genocide which I think is equally important, and that was highlighted by this definition by this Polish Jewish lawyer. And he said that the genocide is really creating conditions of life, daily life, that is calculated to destroy physically, bodily, and mentally. And so genocide has a psychological intent as well as a physical destructive intent. And we have witnessed that psychological warfare that the Israelis have been embarking on in Gaza, everywhere, even in the West Bank, for many, many years. And so Gaza is a densely populated area. It is the world's largest concentration camp, tightly controlled, genocide being committed on them, and psychological warfare is committed on a daily basis. And so we know in Gaza, just in terms of context for our viewers, there is a sophisticated surveillance system. The authorities know every single address, every single cell number, every single location, movement of every individual in Gaza. And so the warfare, the psychological warfare, is that knowing you can't move without being observed all the time, outside in your homes. And we know that, and they pride themselves, ironically, in their humanity when they say that we can phone a resident in advance and tell them, no, we're going to bomb their home, and we give them 10 minutes to vacate with their children and their possessions. And you can imagine if that is the life that the people of Gaza live on a daily basis. Every cell phone call triggers trauma in every single individual in Gaza, because you never know when that call is to inform you that you're about to be bombed. So the aim of the Israelis all the time, both in West Bank and in Gaza, is to dehumanize the population, minimize them, and to brutalize them, not just to devastate them and destroy their property, but obviously their bodies and their minds as well. And I think it's important that we understand that context, because that tells us that what's happening at the moment is a continuation of events that have preceded the 7th of October.
Yes. Dr. Lalken, this is a conversation, I'm so into what you're saying because it feels like a history lesson in the context of the narrative that we've been hearing from Western media and been limited in a way to truly understand the life of those Gazans, children and families. So shukran so much for this explicit explanation on the situation of genocide, war, in its true meaning. It's not as if I'm listening to a Wikipedia show. So this is very informative, and I want to continue this conversation and look at some of the impacts of the conflict, the children that has been released from prison, the education system that's currently non-existent in Gaza as well. Online, we have educational psychologist Dr. Yusuf Lalken as we delve into the mental health conditions in Gaza. More just after this. Stay with us. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Very good day to you. Welcome. Maybe it's evening if you may be watching us via the live stream channel on Hilaal.tv. Please tell your family and friends over the beautiful lands and across the seas to do so via our live stream channel so they can watch it right now and interact with us as well. We have educational psychologist Dr. Yusuf Lalken, who finished his MSc at the University in London, London University, and his PhD at the University in Pretoria. And he prides himself in dealing with adolescents, young children, and focuses on the learning and emotional difficulties when it comes to their behavioral challenges. Shukran so much to Dr. Yusuf Lalken for expounding on the topic of war, of genocide, really going into it and giving us a true understanding, the reflection of mental health conditions within Gaza. That's our conversation we're having for today, so please stay with us. Dr. Lalken, I want to look at some of the impacts with regards to the conflict, with regards to learning, the development. What has the impact of conflict done to individuals that has, and children? How has the ongoing conflict and political instability in Gaza contributed to the mental health struggles of individuals, particularly the children and adolescents? And how does the mental health crisis in Gaza impact the cognitive and emotional development of children and young adults, especially taking in consideration to the young adults and children that were released recently from the prisons in Israel, saying that they were there for 5+ years, lost most of their childhood, being imprisoned from childhood. So let's look at the impact on the conflict in these various instances.
You know, Hawa, one of the great ironies of our time, it almost seems like the world is looking at Gaza for the first time. Mm-hmm. And so questions that many, many people have asked as a matter of fact over the years, many people are discovering only recently. And so when the issues of the hostages came up, mm-hmm. we had to remind people that over many, many years, women and children were literally kidnapped and taken hostage, detention without trial for many, many years. And so when they were released recently, it seemed that people for the first time seemed to ask the question, why were all these women and all these children of tender ages, why were they in prison? And it's been going on for many, many years. And so I think it is an opportunity for us to begin to capture the moment, as it were, to begin to talk about Gaza as if it is for the first time. But of course, we know it is not the first time. And we know that we've been predicting this kind of disintegration of the society and the consequences for the well-being of children over many years. In fact, as far back as 2005, the late Dr. Al-Sarraj, who was the founder of the community health program in Gaza, warned, I mean, at that time, the Israelis were just pulling out of Gaza, and he was already warning that the purpose of Israel was to induce to the population of Gaza a sort of learned helplessness, being captive to fear and being paralyzed in terms of taking action. And he warned, as it has come to fruition over the years, that this deepening crisis, of increasing post-traumatic stress, depression, and suicide is bound to take place. In terms of young people, and I'm very mindful of time, I just want to make this point, just to give context again, and just to truly understand. Since 2005, we refer to Gaza only. There's been several major wars. In 2008, it was Operation Cast Lead. In 2012, it was Operation Pillar of Defense. In 2014, Operation Protective Edge. And then, of course, in 2023, we have the current genocide. And in between, there was this constant mowing of the lawn, as they referred to, where they would go in and just wipe out people, facilities, resources on a regular basis. And when you think about the average 18-year-old, an 18-year-old about to start university in Gaza has seen and has experienced 4 wars, major wars. The average 14-year-old who is about to start high school has experienced 3 major wars. The average 10-year-old who is about to start with the intermediate phase, which is the most exciting period for any child, because the foundation has been set, and they now can embark on wider learning. The average 10-year-old has experienced 2 wars already. So one can imagine the impact of the war on the well-being of young children. Now, we could have statistics, and I think it's easy to compile that and say 95% of all children in Gaza suffer from depression and anxiety and continuous stress. But to give us a taste of what life is like, recently in Cape Town, we had a group organizing what they called the Gaza monologue, where they captured the voices of young people. And I just want to read, in the time that I have, just 2 stories that reflect the horror that has been visited on the young people in Gaza. And it was written in 2010. Now, in 2010, it was 2 years after the major Operation Cast Lead. 2 years later, the Operation Pillar of Defense. This is a young man, I would imagine, probably around about 14, given his language. But Ahmad Tahar writes the following. He says, When the bombing started, I thought the only martyr I would see would be a tree. So in his innocence, he imagined that the trees, the environment will be destroyed. But as soon as I got home, there were 4 martyrs in our street, as if waiting for me to say goodbye to them. When I was done with that, there were 3 more martyrs in our street, in the same family. So I buried them, we returned to our neighbor's house, and 2 houses down the street was bombed, and the house was wiped off the ground. Everyone died. I felt sad for the little ones. That's the story. That's the experience. That's the taste of what Gaza children experience. The other one wrote about Shifa Hospital, which we now all know. It's in the Shifa Hospital, a site I will never forget. Hundreds of corpses, one on top of each other. Their flesh, their blood, and their bones are all melting on each other. You wouldn't know the difference between a woman, a man, and a child. And we know, of course, that was phosphorus. So the impact is huge. And if we think about what's happening currently, what has shocked people is the sheer scale of the devastation. In this particular story, the homes were still there. The neighborhood was still intact. The streets were still there. And we know now none of that exists. And so that description of 2010 is hugely amplified currently. And these stories must still be told. And hopefully, inshallah, there will be down the line.
I think for me, what comes out is these stories that we don't hear about, that we don't often see, is underhanded by the immense bombing, the immense trauma, the visuals that you see of blood and buildings collapsing, and not realizing that there's actual people around there that's experiencing it,
Absolutely.
that's visualizing it. Not just visualize, that's in that rubble, that's under that building. So for us, we sort of relate in a way that it's not too far off because, as you said, yes, it's not war, it's genocide, but we see it in front of us. And we have to also deal with the psychological effects it has on us. But what about those mental conditions of those individuals? But we're quickly going to pay the bills, Dr. Lalken. When we get back, I want to unpack the educational system and the mental health. And as an educational psychologist, what is your view on the current state of the education system? And I know that's a big ask. The current education system that's non-existent, because so many of the kids have not passed away or died, have been killed, literally been murdered. So we'll talk with Dr. Yusuf Lalken after this short break. We'll continue this conversation of the mental health conditions in Gaza just after this. Stay with us. Online is educational psychologist Dr. Yusuf Lalken, all the way from the beautiful Mother City in the Western Cape. I'm Khawa Solomon. Stay with me as we unpack the mental conditions in Gaza and looking at the educational system and the mental conditions. As I said earlier, and Dr. Lalken, the non-existent educational system. As an educational psychologist, how does this current state of this educational system in Gaza affect the mental well-being of students and teachers as well, because those are ones that we don't often talk about. And what sort of recommendations do you have for creating a possible, more supportive and nurturing learning environment in Gaza? Is that even possible?
Yeah. So for Gaza, life matters. And so the Gazan people live and they learn. And what they've learned over the years is that issues and challenges cannot be tackled in a piecemeal fashion. There is an integrated, connected system evolving in Gaza over many years. And so schools become sites for many things. And obviously, the primary site for an education system is learning. And so the Gazan people attach enormous value to education. I think we have all seen images over the last few weeks of young children being martyred in their school uniforms. And what strikes me always is the sheer joy on their faces of going to school, the pride taking their appearance and the parents taking their appearance and so on. So they heavily invested in education. So the learning dimension is a given. But I again want to highlight just how seriously they do take education. The literacy rate in Gaza in 2020 was 97.51%. Now that's a high figure for a community that we've just described has been subjected to extreme horror and deprivation. That's the level of attachment they have to education. And I want to compare that figure with the two countries that view the people in Gaza as animals and dehumanize them all the time and call them savages and barbarians. The literacy rate in America is 79%. The literacy rate in Israel is 91%. So immediately we can see that Gazans are heavily invested in the education system. But they've learned. And what they've learned over the years is that the education system can be a site for psychosocial support to learners, teachers, and to parents. So in recent years, there's been many projects that have been embarked upon to promote mental health within the school system, to build resilience, to nurture self-esteem, and to foster growth. And so between 2015 and 2020, over a 5-year period, there was a huge investment in a project that they called Empowering the School for Mental Health Protection in Gaza. And what he did was begin to build within schools protective factors against trauma. It was built for the school and into the system. It provides psychosocial support activities for learners, and it built the capacity not only of the teachers to provide the psychosocial support, but even the parents were part of that project. So it was a huge project that was intended to be duplicated elsewhere. So in this particular project, just for the benefit of the viewers, to give you the size, 62 schools were involved in this project, where they experimented and they ingrained that particular protective system into the school. 16,000 learners, 1,200 teachers, 2,000 parents, and 5,000 community members around the schools were included in this particular project through educational programs. And now we are in 2023. And again, I want to remind viewers that the destruction of schools is intentional, because the destruction of schools is intended to destroy programs like these. And so now we know, for example, that all of that is gone. All the investment that we have made is gone. So we don't know how many of the 62 schools are still standing. We don't know how many of the 16,000 learners are still alive, how many of the 2,000 parents, 1,200 teachers and counselors that we had invested in, how many of them have survived. So it is a systematic breaking down and disintegration of a society. And they targeted schools with that intention. And they know that we do schools and we do churches and we do hospitals. We deprive people of their support. And so we slowly dismantle the community, and in the process, we dismantle the self-esteem of the people in that community. So now, we have a situation where schools are used as shelters if they're still standing. Many of them clearly are in such a state that it's dangerous to use, and others have just been destroyed. And 700,000 children are without schooling for the foreseeable future. And so now the impact will have to be measured once the bombing has stopped, and we can understand what it is we need to do to rebuild capacity and to rebuild infrastructure and to restore humanity in Gaza again.
So this is a deliberate action of breaking down the schools, deliberately not wanting to give the children their basic human rights of education, of learning. Children walking in their school clothes with backpacks is not to be seen in Gaza at the moment until the bombing stops. So very true, Dr. Lalken. Let's look at the trauma and coping mechanisms in Gaza. Many people in Gaza have experienced trauma. What are us, and as you mentioned, most of them have mental conditions like depression. What are some of the common psychological reactions, if you can expound on, with regards to trauma? And how do people in Gaza cope with these challenges? And if I can just mention a quote from Dr. Mads Gilbert, who is a doctor at Al-Shifa Hospital, a resident doctor who goes and travels to Gaza 2 to 3 times a year. And the recent interview I had with him, he expressed, yes, trauma and psychological reactions from these children, from these individuals, but they, in fact, inspire him more. They make him a better person, even though they've gone through this. So just keeping that in mind as well.
Yeah. So when we look at Gaza again in terms of children, there's an organization called Save the Children, and they've been working in Gaza for many years on the ground, as is common in the West Bank as well. Last year in June, they were concerned that the children's mental health was already at breaking point. That was a year ago, before the current genocidal attack. A year ago, they reported, based on their work in the area, that 80% of the children will experience continuous, perpetual state of fear, worry, sadness, and grief. Another disturbing statistic at the time, 2002, was that 75% of the children were bedwetting.
Okay.
And they were beginning to exhibit what we call a reactive mutism. And so reactive mutism is a response to severe trauma. And what happens is that children are just slowly withdrawing, showing signs of depression, not speaking to people, and not exhibiting any sort of facial expression that shows either joy or sadness. But it's a sense of numbness that prevails. And our task, obviously, as an international community and the services within in Gaza, is to bring life to these children, to bring them back to life, as it were. Now we fast forward to 2023, and here we have 2 months of thousands of civilian spaces being bombarded. What the Save the Children campaign or organization have highlighted now is very distressing, because what they're highlighting is that not only are we experiencing a repetitive host of symptoms of trauma, anxiety, the fear, the worry, the concern for your safety, the safety of others, the nightmares, the disturbing memories, the insomnia. All of that is revisited on the children again. But what we worry about now is that there is a clear intent to not only expose these children to these horrors, but at the same time to strip away all kinds of options for support and to strip away the mechanisms for coping. That has been taken away as well. Remember, in the past, there were these schools, there were these mosques, there were these hospitals that could be drawn into supporting these children. But there's no safe space. There's no school, there's no church, there's no mosque, no sense of security. But the second thing is the caregivers, all the people we've trained, from doctors to counselors to rescue workers to ambulance services, have all suffered devastating losses themselves. And so their stress and their trauma makes it more difficult for them to provide whatever service to children. And again, for what to just highlight the extent, since the beginning of November, and we're at the end of November, beginning of December, they calculated 444 families have lost 2 to 5 members at a time. 200 families have lost 10 or more members. And that's just at the beginning of the month, and we've had 4 weeks of relentless bombing. And one of the things that I think is disturbing, and I think Matt Gilbert and others have highlighted, is this new acronym that is written down on pages for children, the WCNSF. It says, and it means, it's a wounded child with no surviving family. No surviving family. And so you can see the nature of the devastation and the trauma that we know have taken on a whole new level, and we are only now have to begin to assess that and begin to determine what it is that we need to do. And of course, going forward, it's going to be a combination of the international community and the infrastructure within Gaza. And as Matt Gilbert has always pointed out, we can't come with solutions. We have to create solutions with the people of Gaza, because they have the potential, the ability, the capacity to take care of themselves with the support and the interests of the international community.
So I want to bring in resilience and the role of education with regards to resilience in our next segment. Dr. Yusuf Lalken, educational psychologist, expounding on the mental health conditions in Gaza and more just after this. Don't go anywhere. Earlier, as described by Dr. Yusuf Lalken, the biggest, as we know, it has been in media and described in many writings, as the biggest concentration camp in the world. A prisoner, but prisoners who have no rights. Even normal prisoners have rights to a lawyer, to some basic human rights. The desecration of the education system, which is non-existent in Gaza. So the conversations we're having is mental health conditions in Gaza with educational psychologist Dr. Yusuf Lalken, based out in the Western Cape. And I want to touch on now the role of education in resilience, because we spoke about the children, yes, they have been shown many signs of trauma and continuous trauma, and not even having a space to have the treatment or the therapy for it, but then bombarded with some more. So Dr. Lalken, in your experience, what role does education play in supporting or potentially exacerbating mental health issues among the residents of Gaza? And can education play a role in building resilience or even supporting mental health?
Yeah, no, absolutely. And I think the notion of resilience permeates the entire society of Gaza. So it's not confined exclusively to either the mental health system or the education system. It permeates the entire system by virtue of a concept that I'm sure many of our listeners will be, the viewers will be familiar with, namely sumud. And so sumud, loosely translated, is resilience. And that's a combination of steadfastness and endurance. Both at an individual level, but also at a collective level. It is both sort of a state of mind and a state of action. And so what we know with the education system within Gaza, the notion of sumud, as described, is integrated into the learning and teaching process of young people, because the realization is clear that we are not exempt and never will be from attacks from outside. And so the notion of sumud then permeates the education system and every other aspect of life in Gaza. And there are 5 elements to this notion. I think the one is it is pro-social, it is community-centered. Second thing is promote endurance and steadfastness. The third element is an element of resistance. So everything about Gaza, and again, there are many speakers who have come to raise this issue, that everything about Gaza is resistance. So even the notion of schooling is an act of resistance, and it's a site of resistance. But more importantly, I think what we have witnessed when we listen to these children and the young adult, that sumud also means love in the face of huge injustice. And so everywhere when we hear the voices of Gaza, it's a voice of love and compassion and acceptance. And that is part of their resistance, that in the face of hate, they love. In the face of death, they celebrate life. And so that teaching, I think, permeates the education system, and it permeates, of course, the entire community. And when we look at that community, I think, again, it's important to highlight the four elements of Gaza as a society that helps them to endure and to persevere and steadfast. I think the one thing is family. Huge value attached to just not the immediate family, but extended family. And that is due to circumstances, but due to an understanding that we are reliant on each other. So the first level of support for resilience is, of course, the family. And then you have your neighbors, your immediate community, people around you. They offer additional layers of support to each other. And the third element that promotes resilience, I think, within the community and society is, of course, religion. And there's absolutely no doubt, whether you're a Muslim or you're a Christian in Gaza, you feel a complete reliance and to God, a complete patience when these horrors that are visited upon you, a hopefulness that things will turn around, and after all difficulty there will be ease. So religion plays a huge part, family plays a huge part, and then of course culture. And the culture of Gaza and of the West Bank is a culture that is forged by memory. And so they've learned over the years what they need in order to deal with the present and what they need to, in fact, forge the future. And it is clear that they do it, but they are going to need international support in order to help them with rebuilding Gaza in the future.
Talking about international support, looking ahead, what long-term strategies or policies do you believe could contribute to improving mental health outcomes in the region? And what role can international community play in supporting these mental health initiatives in Gaza? And from any successful models from these regions, what could be applied?
Yeah. Look, I think the one thing we've learned, and we learn every time a new attack happens, we learn after every tragedy, we learn. And I think one of the things that Gaza has learned is the fact that it's going to take time to rebuild, and we're going to need international support to put the infrastructure back in place. There's clearly a lack of food, electricity, water, and medication, and the international community can help with that. Well, there's a need for educational programs and money required to train, and support, psychosocial support within our schools, all of that. But I think the one thing we've learned from this event that clearly must be the turning point for the future of Gaza, that none of these interventions is ever going to be sustainable and succeed in the long run until we understand that if we want to support Gaza, we need to strengthen their human rights. The human rights of women and the human rights of children have clearly shown that when you remove that, then they are vulnerable and they will continue to be vulnerable. So when you look at the international community, I think we need to say clearly to them, thank you for the manpower, thank you for the volunteers, thank you for the medication and the support. But unless we all collectively begin to recognize that without the recognition of the people of Gaza's basic human rights, everything we build, and we will rebuild, can be destroyed, because there are people waiting to destroy what we build. And so we need to, in the future, if you look at international support, it has to be an international support for the basic human rights of Gaza and their protection under international law. And once that is in place, then the rebuilding process can start.
Inshallah, Dr. Yusuf Lalken, unfortunately, that's where we have to leave it. 30 seconds quickly to wrap up this very important topic and a message to the viewers.
Yeah, I've kind of run out of words, as it were, on the issue. But again, I just want to emphasize that Gaza lives, Gaza learns, and Gaza will rebuild. And it needs the international community and every support that we can give. And this, as somebody said, is not a trend. It's not something that lasts for a day or two, but it has to be an ongoing solidarity, first of all, with the people of Gaza, from every person who values human rights and who values humanity. And to recognize that this is not only a humanitarian issue, it's a human rights issue. And it's the human rights that we need to begin to fight for. And then all the other things I think that we wish for Gaza and its children will come to fruition.
Apt words from educational psychologist Dr. Yusuf Lalken, literally putting many things into context for us. So if you've missed the show, please join our YouTube channel, Hilaal TV Life Matters, and catch whatever you've missed on the show. But shukran so much, Jazakallah khair to you, Dr. Yusuf Lalken. Hope you have a good day further, and we appreciate your time. All the best, and assalamu alaikum.
Wa alaikum salam wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
Very interesting show on the mental health conditions of Gaza, looking at an educational perspective, how this conflict has impacted individuals, what the international community has to do about it, and how we as a community can actually change things, understanding the context, educational system, and the mental health of the, alhamdulillah, that's all that they say, our Gazan people, and we continue to make dua for them. They are with us in our hearts and souls, and Allah has a better plan for that, for them. But what are we learning from that situation as well? Maybe that's the message we need to know. Next up on Life Matters, stay tuned. We speak to Yasmina Samai and many other guests as well. Dr. Fatima Baba, aesthetic doctor, talked to us about looking after our skin during this harsh weather and raising happy, healthy families within a happy home. As well from Nikki Bush, parenting and human potential experts. Some interesting conversations we have on the next shows of Life Matters. So please stay tuned to Hilaal TV and catch our YouTube channels loaded on Hilaal TV Life Matters. But from myself for now, wassalamu alaikum and goodbye.